Hey there. So, for tonight's dinner or recipe that we're going to do is going to be pizza. So, we're going to make our own dough, pizza sauce, grate some cheese, and then I'm actually making two recipes because we usually double up and then I put some in the freezer because my boys like to have their own whole pizza for the night. We make pizza and then my husband and I will take the whole batch that we make, the second batch, and we'll divide it up between us because we like thinner crust and smaller pizzas, and then we'll put the rest in the freezer. So I'm going to give y'all a little rundown on how we do that. I have been off and on making pizza dough since probably about 2012-ish, and it took forever to find a recipe that I really liked and to tweak a recipe that I liked in order to get the pizza dough to do what I want it to do. So, I'm just going to kind of show y'all how I do it and my process, and then you can decide if you want to try it yourself. So, I'm going to use all-purpose flour. I just have a store brand all-purpose flour here right now, but you can use any brand of flour you want. And if you want to use wheat flour, you can do that too. I haven't had very good luck with wheat flour. It doesn't come out as soft and fluffy like pizza dough, like we want pizza dough. So I haven't went back to it. Plus the all-purpose flour and the store brand is much cheaper, so I can get a lot more out of it. So I'm just going to take a sifter. You can use any kind of sifter that you have and you want to use. And just in an extra bowl, I'm going to sift 3 cups of flour. So I'm just going to sift out these 3 cups of flour. And when I get down to these little pieces, I just mash them out so that they're fine ground. I've found that by sifting the flour, that helps for me to get a softer crust, fluffier, softer crust, especially if I'm going to do it in less time, and I'm probably getting flour dust everywhere. So that'll be fun to have flour all over my phone. So you just want to get your flour, you just want it to be like kind of an even, level cup, and then I'm just sifting it. So that's cup number 2, and I'll do all of this again in the second batch. But I'll just do it one time for you guys. Y'all don't have to see me do the second one. So there's cup number 2. And I found that sifting it just really made it a lot better. But I've done it without sifting it, and it's still okay. It's not like too big of a deal. So I just go ahead and do it anyways, just because in the long run it does make it better. So we'll just sift that out. So the ingredients you'll need, maybe I should have went through that first. I'll see what I can do about, so I got this recipe just by searching a copycat Domino pizza dough, and then found someone's recipe and then used it, but then tweaked it a little bit differently. So then I guess I've kind of changed it enough to where it's not really their recipe anymore. So I can just write the recipe in the comments, or make a printout for you guys and link the printout for you guys, so in a PDF. So then we've got our flour. I did 3 cups. Now the recipe is going to call for 3.5 cups, depending on, it all depends on the moisture in the air. So I do 3 cups at first, and then you'll see the process, and then I'll go back and add more flour if it's needed as we stir it up with the dough machine. So I'm going to need a teaspoon of salt. So you can just dump it in there. We did a teaspoon of salt. Now we are going to do a tablespoon of sugar. Now, you can use any sugar you want. I'm sure if you wanted to use honey in here, you could do that too. I just use regular table sugar. It's a store off-brand kind, because it's still better than what I could get from a box dough or from the freezer section, at least from what we've found. So if you want to use organic sugar, then totally do that. It's completely up to you. So we're done with the salt now. And then we're going to get a tablespoon of yeast. Is that what we usually, yes, we use a tablespoon of yeast. So this is just regular yeast, and I'm just dumping it in there, and it's also just a store brand, but it is the fast rise. So if you get a yeast, make sure it's the fast rise. On the slow rise, it'll probably still work, but it could take a little bit longer. And usually on pizza night, I don't always get it done super early. So having the convenience of the fast rise just makes things go a lot quicker. So the next thing I have is this instant dry powdered milk. I don't think it matters if you get the fat-free or the low-fat or the full whole milk powder. It doesn't matter. Just 2 tablespoons of the milk powder. And then we are going to do garlic. I just have garlic powder. So we're going to do a tablespoon of garlic powder. Now this is optional. You can leave the garlic powder out if you'd like. You can choose to make the garlic powder less intense or more intense. We find that for this size of dough that a tablespoon is the perfect amount for us and our taste. We are a family that does like garlic. So just take that into account whenever you decide how much garlic you want to put in yours. So you could start out with a teaspoon and then gradually build up, or you could start out with a tablespoon and then the next time you make it go down. But if you're not sure and you don't want it to be too much garlic, I would start out with less, because you can always add more on the next recipe, and then that way you'll know for sure if you like it or not. Because if you don't put it in there, it's not going to hurt anything. But if you put too much and don't like it, then that's where you could kind of feel like, I don't really want to do that again. So now I'm using avocado oil, and we are going to do 2 tablespoons of avocado oil. And I just dump it all in this one big, well, the KitchenAid mixer. I just dump it all in there. I usually do all the dry stuff and then do the wet stuff. But there's really no, there's no right or wrong in that. Just make sure it's all in there. And then we're going to go get our water. So I'm going to get the water. So we'll put 2/3 of hot water from the coffee pot, and then 2/3 from our water filter that's just room temperature. And that usually makes the perfect warmth temperature, so that the yeast will bubble up and rise and do what it needs to do without having to use tap water, because we use filtered water. So I always have to kind of heat the water up, because the filter stays a bit cooler. Then I can't run the hot water to get it warm enough. So I'm going to get that water. So you guys keep an eye on this for me. Here we are. So we have the water. I just give it a little stir just to make sure I mix up the 2 different temperatures so that they become one temperature. And this little spoon is my all-time favorite spoon for stirring doughs. I have absolutely no idea where you could get one. It says, I don't know how to pronounce that last name, but it says Doctor, and then it says Oetker. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. But I've had it for a very long time, ever since I got married, so 23 years ago, and my mother-in-law gave it to me. And at first we didn't use it a whole lot, but over the years when I started doing doughs and things, I definitely started using it, and there's just something about it that I really like. So now we have our water. We're just going to dump it in. And I'm going to set that to the side, and I'm just going to gently move this a little bit more in focus, or more in view of the camera, and I'm just going to give it a good stir. So I'm not going to do anything super crazy. I'm not going to knead it all by hand or anything. I'm just kind of giving it a good mix. And after I get it nice and mixed, I'm going to let it rest for 10 minutes. So I'm just going to let it sit in this bowl and let it proof with let it proof with all these ingredients in there. That's totally going to be perfect. And then while it proofs, I'm going to make the pizza sauce. So I'm going to set a timer on the microwave. I'm just going to kind of push that to the side. So I'm going to set the timer on the microwave and grab all the ingredients for the pizza sauce. The ingredients I use in the pizza sauce are tomato paste. I don't know if you can see that. I do try when I can to buy the best quality in cans just because of the BPAs and stuff like that and whatnot, and aluminums. But there are some times when it's just easier to do the cans. So I have some tomato paste, just a small jar, one of the tall skinny ones, or short tall skinny ones, I don't know. It's kind of confusing. So anyways, just a 6-ounce jar or can of tomato paste. I think the last time I did some counting and figures, we were able to make pizza night for under like $15. So it really makes a difference. Now, we're not putting a whole bunch of special toppings. We're doing more like just pepperonis and cheese. So it's not like a glamorous pizza. Sometimes if we have leftover meats, we will put the leftover meats on our pizzas. This is a can of tomato sauce, and it's the 8-ounce can. And then I'm going to mix those together. I'm going to add a teaspoon of basil. So I'm just going to dump ingredients in there, and then we'll stir it up. And I have onion powder, so I'm going to do a teaspoon of onion powder. And I'm going to do a teaspoon of oregano. I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of red pepper flakes, or crushed red pepper. I'm going to do a teaspoon of parsley. Really, these ingredients, you can mix them to your heart's content. So however, if you want more of something or less of something, you can always do that. And then I'm going to do a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. We also need a teaspoon of salt. If you forget the salt, it will not be good. So I've done that, so don't do that. It's not the best idea. I will also need a teaspoon and a half of sugar. So here again, I'm just using the table sugar. And then we'll give it a good stir. Here we are with the hot water from the coffee pot, and I'm just going to make sure I have enough for my next batch of dough, and I'm just going to pour some in there. But I do want to save some for my next batch of dough. Don't know if you'll be able to see how much I poured in there. Probably not. I just kind of gently pour a little bit of water in there until it gets to the consistency I want it. There's no really rhyme or reason to what I'm doing here. I just actually we bought some Target brand pizza sauce, and we all liked that flavor of pizza sauce really well. So on the back where the ingredients list was, I read all the ingredients and then said, okay, this is what they're putting in there. So I'm going to, after looking at the back, I took all the ingredients and then saw what they had in the order they had it in, and then decided, okay, we like these ingredients, we don't like these. And then I just took the list and then, configured it in my best cooking knowledge, and then threw some ingredients in here according to that list, added a few that we wanted, and then came up with the sauce. So there's no particulars to it besides I'm just putting in there what we like and how we want it to taste. And you can add other seasonings if you want. If you can find a really good pre-made pizza seasoning sauce, then you can use that, or you can just add a seasoning, like a pizza seasoning. I haven't found a pizza seasoning that is available in my area or where I'm at lately. A long time ago, Kroger's used to put out this pizza. It's a pizza seasoning grinder by Private Selects, and it was super great. But that is now empty, so I just have some other seasonings in there for using the grinder part. So anyways, you can look up other recipes online. If you don't prefer this one, you can take out or add to anything you want. So like this consistency to me is still too thick. My husband would quite like that consistency though, I'm sure. So I'm going to add a bit more water. I'm just going to go to the water filter and add some more water to it. I just added some more water. I don't know if you can see how much I added. And then I'm just going to continue to mix it. And I'll just keep a watch on the texture to see if it gets to the point where I like it or not. And once it gets to the texture that I want, the thickness, the smoothness, then I'll go with that. Now I have taken this and I've put a stick blender in it and I've blended it. I've put avocado oil in it also in the past. So it just depends on how you want it. We've all kind of gotten to the point where I think we prefer it without the oil. So that's how we just end up making it. But all those different ways are really great. So if you like the taste of olive oil, you can put that in here. You can also put it in here. We just end up using avocado oil because we like that, just the basic kind of no taste flavor in our oils. So we're going to set this to the side and let that kind of cure. You could also heat this up in a pot and kind of cook the spices into it, and that's going to give you a more deep, richer flavor. If you do that, I do suggest that you play around with the amounts of seasonings you're putting in there, because when you cook the seasonings and they start to bloom and all that, you could get a much spicier, deeper tasting sauce, and you may not want it to be quite that rich in seasoning. So that's just a suggestion. I haven't actually done that, so I don't actually know the outcome. So here we go. Now we have, the timer has beeped and the dough is ready to be mixed. So we are going to put this down. Actually, I'm going to scrape my spoon off first and get it out of the way. You don't have to be super picky about it like I'm being. And I'm going to put this down in there and make sure you guys can still see what's going on, which I may need to change views and angles here. I have a smaller KitchenAid, so it's really hard to get the camera down in there for you to see. So anyways, you can see how the dough has this like really gummy, sticky texture. It's almost like wet. So we're going to turn this on. And I just have it on the first speed right now. And you can see how it's kind of sticking and pulling. So you saw how it was sticking and pulling. So the goal for the dough is for it to stick more to itself than to you or the bowl, so that when you pull it out of the bowl, it all comes clean. Now it is going to have a tacky, little bit sticky texture, but it shouldn't stick to you. So like if I stick my finger in here, this is going to stick to me. So next time I do it, when it's ready, you'll see that this doesn't happen. So we're gonna let this go. So it's gonna be loud, sorry. I'm also going to start adding flour as this is mixing, just a little bit at a time until it gets to the point where the dough starts to stick to itself more than in the bowl. Go back down with that. So I'm just going to pull out a loose half cup. This one isn't getting sifted, so it'll be okay. If you want to sift it, you certainly can. But on this last one, it's not that big of a deal because we're going to add it in really slowly, so it should be fine. So I'm just going to kind of tap it in there and just let it kind of mix in until I start to see the dough kind of come together on itself. And as long as I see it pulling and stretching, I know I need to add more flour. But the trick here is it's better to add too little flour than to add too much, If you add too much, you will get like a very dense, you know, a dense tasting pizza. If by accident you do that, what you can do is you can let it rise a double time. So you can let it rise for an hour, punch it down, fold it, and then let it rise again for another hour, and then punch it down, and then roll your pizza dough out, and then cook it. And that will help that, you know, extra flour have it, it'll soften it up a bit more because you gave it another chance to rise. So I'm gonna crank it up to the next speed so it'll start moving. Okay, I think that'll do it. Now I'm going to set the timer for another 3 minutes, so you guys watch this for me, and I'll be right back. While that is doing its last minutes of finishing up, we're going to scooch it over, and I have a crock pot liner that I'm going to rub butter in. And so whenever I get through rubbing all the butter in here, it'll all be greased, and then I will take this dough out and move it to here, and then I will use this bowl again to make another batch of pizza, which I don't have to film because, you know, you guys don't need to see it all over again. But it'll be the same exact process that we did this time. And it just seems just as easy for me to do 2 batches as it does 1. But once I get more than, I can't really do more than 2 because I don't have enough bowls to rise everything. I mean, I guess I could because I do have 4 bowls, but I just don't usually do that because that just is a lot of work in one day. Now, if you have a bigger family, you know, you might have a bigger KitchenAid, and then you can do more because then I just don't need to do that much more. So we're a little bit smaller. So this is as much freezer prep as I do for our family when it comes to like pizza dough. So you can always double the recipe. Mine doesn't let me do more than like 6 to 7 cups of flour. So if I do any more than that, it gets kind of bogged down and it's not real happy. So as soon as the microwave beeps, we will get this dough transferred and go through that process. So for now, I'm going to put up the spices that I got out for the pizza sauce. Just a quick add-in, we forgot to put garlic in the pizza sauce. So it's totally optional, you wouldn't have to if you don't want to. If you know your family likes garlic, then definitely put it in there because it definitely gives the authentic pizza taste. But if you don't want it, then you don't have to. If you miss something, it won't be terrible, but it does taste better when you remember all the ingredients. So just note that. So sometimes I will forget one, and then I have to go back and put it in, but it's not too big of a deal. So I'll just mix that back in and let it sit aside. And see, we've got a little bit of stickiness going on there. But I think once we pull it out and I put it in the pan and let it sit and rise, some of that tackiness will come down. So we're going to go ahead and get that ready. I'm going to go ahead and butter this first before I turn this off. It is kind of sticking a lot though. So I'm just going to use my hands. So if I use my hands to do this, my hand now has butter all over it, or oil. You can use oil. And then that makes it so that whenever I take the dough out of here, it's not going to stick to me as much. It shouldn't. So then I'm just going to lift this off. Now if I touch it, see, this probably needs more flour because it's still too sticky. So I'm going to need to put more flour in there. I thought it was good, but it's not quite there yet. So we're going to come back over here. And that does happen to me sometimes where I think it's plenty, but as it continues to mix and break down, it still isn't quite enough. So I just got another half a cup, and I'm just going to gently go around and put some more in there. Just a little at a time. So if that happens, you can just repeat the process until you get the dough to the tacky texture that you want it to be. So you want it to have enough flour so that it holds itself, because if you don't put enough flour in it, it's going to stretch too much and get holes in it when you try to roll your pizza out. But if you have the right amount of flour versus, you know, the right texture in it and denseness, then you'll get this soft, fluffy crust, but you won't have like a thin hole. You know, it won't be so weak that it gets thin holes in it. Usually this situation happens usually most whenever it's humid in the weather. So like, or in the summer when it's really humid here, that's when I have the most struggle with this. In the winter time, I need to use a lot less flour, and we end up with a lot more dense pizza because we're not in the habit of using less flour, because for us it's more humid more often than not. So this is just one of those things where you just kind of have to keep adding it until you get it the right consistency. So it just takes whatever time it takes. You can also hand knead this if you want to. I've done that in the past. It can be fun if you have the time and you're in the mood to do that. I did greatly appreciate having the KitchenAid so that just saves me a little extra arm work. And I can make the pizza sauce and do other things while this is doing its thing. So usually I would continue to watch this and let this do it while I filled up my other bowl with the second batch of pizza dough, so that as soon as this one came out, the other one would be ready to go in. But you can do that however you like. If you want to work one thing at a time, that's totally fine too. Okay, so now it's doing what it's supposed to do. When I touch it, my finger is clean. So even though some of it's not all the way blended in, I think I can just push it all together, because for some reason it's just having trouble today. But it's not sticking to me, and my hands are dry with no flour or oil on them, so I'm going to call that good enough. And so then I just lift this up, and with the buttered hand I'll go in and take this off, and then I will work all this down. I just think that the humidity in the air just seems to constantly change here in Texas in the summer and spring and part of the fall. So I think that just, you know, just those slight changes, even in the middle of making the dough, can make things a little bit hard to judge. So, but in the end, if this happens like it's happening to me, doesn't happen very often, but for whatever reason, while I try to film it, it's totally happening. So all you have to do is just scrape it out. You know, you're just gonna like push it all back together. Can you? Yeah, you guys can see. So I'm just using this wonderful spoon, and I'm just pushing it all together, and then I'm going to take it off of the base, and I'll take this dough ball and put it into my other clean bowl. And I may just go ahead and film the other one, me making the other batch too, just so that way in case it doesn't happen to the other batch, you can see the difference. And I'll just try to figure out how to edit it into like a fast mode. Okay, so usually what I do is I will lean the bowl to the side, and then I'll just try to scrape it to the edge with my spoon. Usually I don't have quite this much trouble with the dough, so it's strange how it's so sticky but yet not sticky today. So as it rises, all that will all calm down and be fine when the gluten fibers start stretching and growing and doing what they do. So that's how I do it. And then I just take my buttered hand and I try to get in there and grab the dough and work it out of the bowl. Like I said, the best, you know, you've got the dough right when you can get it out of the bowl really easily and it comes off clean. So today's just not that day. So I'm gonna use the dough to try to pull up all this other dough and get it all mixed in there. So you can you know, take as much time with this as you want to. You can let it go and leave it there and not worry about it, or you can really try to dig all of that out if you want to. Completely up to you on how you want to do that. I'm going to try to get a little bit more out of it because I know once it gets mixed in, it'll be fine. It's just having a rough day today, I guess. Not as cooperative. So sometimes you will end up with it looking like that instead of just a silver bowl. So we'll see what happens with the next batch. But I assure you, this batch will turn out just fine. So I put it in the bowl, and then I just kind of take the bottom layers and fold them over to the top until I get a circular-ish ball, and kind of press it all in, and then I just pick it up and flip it over and kind of press it down a little bit. And then I'm going to wash my hands, and I'm going to put a moistened towel, kitchen towel, on top of it. So I will have you guys watch this, and I will be right back. Okay, so I have just a regular tea towel. I mean, I feel like these are more like a mop towel, and I just like the thicker, nicer ones. They hold up better in our house. So I just kind of moistened it to where it's nice and damp, and then I just lay it over top of this, and then I set it in in the warmest part of our house, which is on top of the oven, and then I let this one sit. I usually would already have the other one, the dough made, like the base of the dough made, all the dry ingredients, and then I'll add in the oil and the water right before I put it on the stand mixer to mix it. So I'm going to go ahead and go through and do all of that with that batch because I don't already have it made, so I'm going to have to remake that one. So this one is probably going to end up rising a bit longer than usual, but it's not a big deal. So once I get the other dough going, then I'll probably do the other dough the fast way, and I won't proof it in the container for the 10 minutes, and I won't do the sifting, so that way you guys can see the two different ways that you can do it, and you can see that they both pretty much turn out the same for the most part. And that can show you another way to kind of save some time with the pizza dough. I do find that this way ends up making it rise faster, and it's a lot softer, because the flour has been, you know, sifted and there's no hard chunks. It's really fine and thin, which may be part of the reason why it gets a little bit stickier as it's mixing. So we'll compare that as we make the next one. So I'm going to set this on the stove, and then we'll come back and do the recipe again, and we'll go from there. So usually that dough would rise anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. You can let it rise more, and do a punch down and then another rise if you would like. So it's completely up to you on all that. The more rises you give it. Now I'm not sure that I would give it more than one rise. I guess some people do. I think the more rises you give it, the more sour it's going to have a more sour taste. So, but as long as you punch it down and let it rise again, you can keep doing that a couple of times. So, alrighty. So this time we're just going to loosely get 3 cups of flour. And I'm not even going to sift it or anything. So what I do is I go into my bag and I scoop some, and then I dump it out, and then I scoop a bit more and kind of shake it until it's it's like even on the top. So you want it to be like a flat cup. You don't want it to be bubbled over. So we have 1. And we have 2. And we have 3. I honestly kind of want to just go in with 4. Let's go in with 3.5 because I have a feeling that. So there's 3.5. And we'll just let that hang out, because even when I do it this way, you still sometimes need to add more flour, regardless of letting it proof or not. Alright, so we're going to do our salt, which is 1 teaspoon. We're going to do our sugar, which is 1 tablespoon. Just be sure not to contaminate your sugar with, don't use your oil spoon to dip back into your sugar, because that could be a mess. So we're done with the sugar, and then we're gonna go with our yeast. So we're gonna do a tablespoon of yeast. Just pour that right in there. And we're gonna have 2 tablespoons of instant dry milk. 1 and 2. And then we're going to have our tablespoon of garlic, which again is optional. And then we'll have our 2 tablespoons of avocado oil. There's 1 and 2. So I'm going to have you guys keep an eye on this for me while I go get the water. And we're going to do 1.3 cups. So half of the room temperature or the cooler water, and then the other half is going to come from the coffee pot. I'm just going to take one of my other little spoon and just stir this water up. And then I'm just going to kind of mix this a little bit. We don't want this really warm water going directly on the yeast. We want it to be in the mixture so that it's not, because if the water's too hot, it could kill the yeast. I don't think that water would be too hot, but just to make sure, I kind of give it a little bit of a mix. And now I'm just going to kind of give it a rough mix so that we don't have flour dust going everywhere when I put the dough hook on. And then we will add the dough hook. And then I'm going to scrape off my spoon again. And now this time I'm just going to let this go and just keep adding flour to it until it's ready, just like the other one. But we're not going to let it rest for 10 minutes before we start adding the flour, or before we start mixing it. We're just going to go straight into it. I can see there's like with our two edges, especially the other dough's still in there, so there's going to be a little sticky side, and that's going to come out of here for a little bit now, but get that right, which now, fairly. And when you do anything, use like the flour so the dough has this non-sticky texture, and it's more so, and it does the gold. And when the dough that flour, when the dough good, and you just let it for 3 minutes, just incorporate it. looking like the dough is doing really well, so I don't think I need to add more flour. So I'm going to get a cloth, a washcloth, and I'm going to clean up this area so that I can grate some cheese from a block here in just a sec. Let's give it a touch and see. Yep, see, no sticky on my finger. So we're good. I'm not sure. I was from touching the button. Okay, so it's a little tacky, and that's what you want because you don't want your dough to be so hard that it turns into a brick when you cook it. Now, with this one, I don't have any butter on my hands, and we're just going to use this pan to rise the dough, so I'm not going to worry about greasing up the pan or getting a new one. We'll just leave it like this, and whenever I go to pull it out, I'll just have to use a spatula to kind of scrape it down, and most of that dough will incorporate into this, and it'll all be just fine. It will work out just completely fine. So then I'm just going to take this off, make sure we got most of the dough off of there that we can get. And I'm just going to pop this in the sink and put that dough back on itself. And then we'll just, sometimes this can be a little bit tricky to get off of there. Okay, so I will try to do the same thing I did in the other one, but because there's not a greased line in here, it's probably not going to let me turn it over very well because it's sticking to the other dough that's in there. So then I'll just push it down and it'll still close itself off and rise just fine. So we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to wash our hands and get a cloth, a damp cloth, and put over this and then put it on the stove. So you guys watch this for me and I will be right back. Alright, so we have this nice damp cloth. We are going to put that over that. I like it to be pretty moist of a cloth because even though it's really humid in here, if we don't have a nice moist cloth, the dough can get a little bit hard and crusty on top. And I think it's just because it is kind of warm, maybe. I don't know why it's like that. There's humidity in the air, but yet the dough will get, it just forms like a crust on top. So I make sure this is nice and it's not like I can't wring it out anymore, but it is nice and wet. I mean, it's more wet than it is damp, but it's not dripping wet. It's a nice soaked cloth that's been wringed out really well. So I'm going to go set this on the stove and then we will grate some cheese. Alright, so I'm going to pull out my favorite cheese grater, and we just grated cheese in it the other day, so it's already nice and full of being used, and occasionally cheese will get kind of stuck in there. I've had this cheese grater for quite some time, but it has been the best cheese grater I've ever bought, and I really like it. So my family likes a bit of both kinds of cheese, so we're going to grate up some sharp cheddar cheese, and then I will grate up some mozzarella cheese. I think I will probably just grate up this whole block, and then the other block will grate up, this will be about a pound, and then the other block is a 2-pound block, and that usually gets us through 2 batches of the pizza dough. So that usually works out fairly well. Something's not lined up quite right. There we go. So I just really like this grater because I just feel like it's more stable, and the graters that are standing up, I end up cutting my fingers every time, or the ones that you have to hold in your hand. So this one is really great. I really like it. It actually came with some different sizes, and then it came with a few other different settings, like where you can make really thin potatoes, or what was the other one's like crinkle cuts. Maybe you can crinkle cut different veggies and things like that. So that's, I mean, we don't use the other ones all that much, but if this cheese grater goes out, I'm definitely going to be looking for something similar to replace it. I'm not sure if this one is still even made or if this brand is still made, but I have greatly loved it, because one of the things is you can grate all of the cheese that you want to grate at one time, just by opening it and dumping it, or you can leave it in here and it seals it up pretty good so that it doesn't get, you know, too gross or anything. So it definitely serves its purpose in our home. So whenever I'm filling up bags, I like to kind of push it out, like tuck it over, and then now they make them with this like stand up thing so that they're wide at the bottom, and then I just dump my cheese in there, and then I just keep grating. This is a great meal prep idea. I really like it when, you know, I don't always do it, but I like it when I make myself come home with the cheese and I grate up a whole block for the week. Then I'm not having to, you know, stop and grate cheese in the middle of cooking dinner. So that's a great tip, to make sure that you got a little, you know, because my husband wants his dinners fresh every night. So we don't do a lot of leftovers. We don't do a lot of freezer meals and things like that. Most of the freezer meals are for my kids, so that they have something that's quick and easy to get to, or if they don't like what I'm cooking for dinner, they have a second option. So that's our main reason for doing extra pizza on pizza night. But having to do a fresh dinner every night, it's just really nice to already have the cheese ready to go and already prepped and grated, so then you can just measure and throw it into the pan. So that's the way I usually do that and prefer it. But sometimes I don't always, you know, get myself to do the grating until the time of. Now on pizza night, there's really no way around grating it the day of, because we end up using the whole block that day. So we probably won't use all of this today, but it's possible. It just depends how much cheese the kids really want. Now on the mozzarella cheese, I do budget that cheese for everyone, so everyone does measure and get like a certain amount of cheese, which might sound a little bit mean, but you know, when you're on a budget, you know, kids need to diversify how much cheese they're eating, in my opinion, and so I do kind of have them measure, just so that way all the pizzas get an equal amount of cheese, and so that way we don't ending up with dough that doesn't have any cheese and stuff like that. So we do have like a portioned out measurement for that. So I'm just gonna sit here and finish grating cheese, and you're welcome to watch, or you're welcome to fast forward. Alright, that cheese is grated, so I'm just going to close it a little bit, kind of squish the air out, but not really mash it down too much. And then to the refrigerator this will go, and to the trash these will go. So this would be a good time for, if you are waiting on your dough to rise still, and you've got all your other ingredients ready to go for your pizza. You've got your sauce, you've got your cheese grated, you've got your pans cleaned, and everything's ready to go. Then you can wash up all the dishes that were dirty in the process. And then that way you can kind of have the kitchen a little bit more cleaned and ready to go when your pizzas are ready to roll out. Granted, when the pizza's ready to roll, like you're ready to roll out the dough, this is all going to get dirty again. But it's not too bad. But if you can get all these other dishes done, then all you have to do is wipe down the counter, and then you'll be able to sit and eat while your pizza is nice and warm, and you won't have to come back to the kitchen later. But my teens are the ones that help me clean the kitchen, so I have the privilege of just putting the dishes in the sink and allowing them to clean them before they go to bed. So yay for teens. So that's where we are in our season, and then helping them learn responsibilities. So, but if it was just me doing the dishes by myself and doing the cooking by myself, that is the way I would get it done. So we will be back when the dough is done rising. All right, so we're back. The dough has risen, and we are going to roll it out and get pizzas ready. So this is the first one we made, and it, see, it's nice and it's got the nice texture to it. It's not too sticky. So I'm just going to set the cloth to the side because I'm going to roll. I'm probably going to split this one. Am I going to do this one in half for the boys, or yeah, I'll probably do this one in half for the boys. So the first thing we want to do is we want to punch all this air out of it, so that it stops the rising process, and then we'll be able to roll out the dough. So this one should come out fairly easy and shouldn't have any problems because we oiled the pan. So I'm just gonna have a little side of the flour, a little side cup of flour, and then I want to try to rub the counter down, but I don't want it to be too floured. Just a gentle amount of flour so it doesn't stick to the counter. And then I'm just gonna pull this out. And this is the batch where so it is still a little bit sticky. You can see how there's a bit of stickiness. Okay, so there's a bit of stickiness. And we're just gonna roll that together. I just want to press the air out of it. I don't want to, like, you know, start kneading it all over again, because I want to keep that soft texture. But I just want to kind of get it even, so then I can cut it in half and divide it as, you know, as in half as possible for my kids. Let's see, we're not quite in frame all the way. Let me scoot this back just a little. Okay. So I'm just going to cut it in half as evenly as possible so that my boys can each have half of the dough to make themselves and each a really large pizza. So then I'll take this and I'll try to get it in a circular round ball as possible. So the dough, it does feel a little bit dense, but not too bad. And it does have a little bit of stickiness. It's not as fluffy as maybe I would have wanted it. It seemed like it was struggling today when we were making it, but it all usually works out, even whenever I think maybe it's not going to be as good as it should be. So I just put a little dust of flour on it, and then I set it to the side. And then I cover it with that same towel, and then I roll this one out and do the same thing. Just want to get it in a circular disc type shape. And the tighter, I mean, I'm not trying to roll it super tight because, or, you know, yeah, I'm not trying to roll it in a ball super tight because we're not going to let it rise again. We're going to actually roll it out. I just want to get it in a nice, you know, disc shape so that the dough will be a round pizza shape. And then I just dust it with the flour so that way when I roll it out in a minute, it won't stick to the counter. And so then I'm just going to tuck this one under the other back side of that towel, just so that way that one doesn't dry out while I'm working with the other one. So you could let this rise just a little bit if you wanted to for a few minutes, but it's probably going to be fine. I usually don't have to. Okay, so I just want to get some things out of my way here. And then we are going to roll this pizza dough out. So I just do a pressing, roll it out, and then I twist it. So I make sure that there's enough flour underneath the dough so that it doesn't grab the counter, and sometimes I'll swirl it like this. And I just kind of keep twisting it to keep that nice rounded shape to it. Just little twist and roll until you get it the thickness you want it and the size that you want it to be. So the more you roll it, the thinner your pizza is going to be. And then I'm going to have to call one of my boys in here to grab it. Their pizzas are really big, so sometimes they can get to be a little bit hard to work with when it comes to picking them up. So I always try to put this down and then kind of pick them up and move them, just so that way they don't stick to the counter. Especially if I have a tendency to press really hard whenever I'm rolling, and then they'll kind of stick. And so we don't want them to stick to the counter, because I have had it where they'll get little holes in them, like right there. So if that happens, you can just mash it back together. It's usually fine. Okay, so I'm going to have you keep an eye on this while I go get a pan. There's one of our pizza pans. It looks really gnarly and old, which it is very old, but it still cooks pizza wonderfully. And so I'm just going to lay that out on a pan. And then I'm going to let one of my kiddos work on this one. And we set the oven for 425, and we cook them for 13 to 14 minutes. So it just depends on how you want it, how toasty you want it, and how thick your crust is. The thicker your crust, the longer you're going to want to cook it. Alright, so I'm going to put this on the stove and then let them work on it. Alright, so now we're going to do the next one. We'll get this one rolled out. And it's just the same process. I just roll it out, get it started, keep it moving. If you don't want to do it on your counter surface, I know not everybody has extra counter surfaces to work on. We got really lucky with the way that our house was designed. It has a kitchen island, which now I feel like if I ever got a new house, I'd have to have a kitchen island, because we do so much cooking from scratch like this that I don't know what I would do if I didn't have this extra open space to work with. So I just keep twisting it and pressing it. So anyways, it's actually a mobile home, and I guess it was just the way it was designed, but we are completely happy with the kitchen island. So if we ever decide to move, we'll probably have to install a kitchen island in the next home. So I know that they do have some on wheels and different things that you can add to your kitchen, so that could be helpful. I don't know how big they are or anything like that. I've never had to look into them, but I do appreciate having this kitchen island. And it has like cabinets underneath it and our drawers for our silverware and stuff. So I mean, if you design a kitchen on your own, that would be a great thing I would recommend, is having an island in your kitchen. Alright, so I don't get my pizza doughs super perfect, but I mean, I'd like to, but that's just not the way life goes. So by the time my kids do the pizza dough the way they want it on their pan, it all looks perfectly fine and tastes great, and they eat it and love it, and it's wonderful. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on this while I go get another pan. These are, I'm not even sure how big these pans are. They're quite huge. They look really terrible, I know, but they work just fine. So we just keep using them. If it's not broke, don't fix it. So I might have gotten this dough. I might have got this dough a little too big, as you can see. So one of my kids will work on it and he'll fix it, I think. So I'm just going to quit messing with it. Alright, so I'm going to call them in here and have them get started. We have our next batch of dough, and you can see how it is puffed up, but when I touch it, it's still not sticky. Of course, my hands have flour, so it puffed up really great. Now, this is the one that we had all the sticky residue and we didn't oil it, so you can see how there's a bit more stickiness. So if you just punch it all the way down, get that air out, then I can take a spatula and I can just scrape the edge of the bowl like this. And if I just scrape the edge of the bowl, I can get all that dough out of there. Hopefully you guys can see that. I'm trying to make sure the camera's not in the way of me rolling. So, and then I just pull it all out with that spatula. Now I do need to make sure I flour that really good, because you can see that's pretty sticky. So we'll see if we put enough flour in that one. Okay. And we're just gonna gently put some flour on this, because I am gonna make this one into 10 equal sections, or as equal as I can get them. So I roll it up. I kind of make this one more of a log when I do it, because it's a little bit easier for me to cut 10 sections in a log versus a piece of pie in a pie shape. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just cut it in half to get my 10 sections. And then I'm going to do 5 on each side. So there's one, there's the 2, so then I have these halves. So then I'm just going to try to find the middle and then go out a little bit, and then do the same thing on this side. Now you could tear off the dough and you could weigh it and get really persnickety about how perfect you want them to be, but I don't worry about it. I just get one that's, you know, close, and then I just cut these 2 in half. And that usually, they're pretty similar whenever I do it that way. And then that makes almost 10 equal portions. They're pretty close in being equal. So then I set these to the side. And then I'm going to do the same thing to this. So I'm going to turn it the other way. And I'm going to find the middle, and then I'm just going to go out a little bit from the middle. And then out a little more. And so then there's one, and then I just cut these other in half, and then we have 10. Now it is getting a little bit too sticky on the counter. Okay, so now we have our 10 fairly equal sections, and then I'm going to mash them into circular disc shapes. So just so that way whenever I roll them out, they're as round as possible. And then I just kind of dip them in a little bit of this flour here on the bottom, and then I set them to the side, and then I'll start covering them with the wet cloth that we had earlier. So if the dough is sticky a little bit, it'll stick to itself, which is kind of what we want here. So when we roll it out and form it into this ball, it actually stays in that circular shape. And then just dip it in the flour and continue until I get them all rolled up, and then we'll roll them out into pizza crusts. And so my husband and I don't do a crust layer on our pizza, we just leave them flat, but my boys like to do a crust layer on theirs, so they fold their crust over pretty well. I guess sometimes me and my husband do it, but not always. And I think everyone's favorite night is when we do cheese stuffed crust, but we don't do that all the time because it doesn't fit into the budget pizza on a regular basis. So that's just every once in a while that we will do that. And for that, we just buy like little cheese sticks, and we just break them in half, and then we put them around the ring of the pizza and then fold the dough over, and they turn out great. So that's another idea if you want to splurge and have some stuffed crust. I guarantee you that the stuffed crust you make at home will be still cheaper than what you can get at the store. So, or it's still cheaper than what you can get at a restaurant. If you would like to have thinner crusts, you know, these smaller pizzas, but you want the crust to be thinner, I have done it where we've done 12 out of this batch of dough, and that works great too. We just found that we were kind of wanting a little bit thicker crust, so instead of doing 12, I started doing 10. I've done 9 also. 9 was a little bit, we felt like the crust was a little bit too thick, so we went to 10, and that works out pretty good. That gives us 4, so 4 for my husband and I. We each get 2, one for the night's dinner and the next day's lunch, and then there's 6 that go in the freezer. So that usually works out pretty good, and that gives the kids a few lunches throughout the week. Okay, so now that I've got them all rolled out and ready, then I start with the first ones that I already had rolled, and they had been resting for a bit, and then I rolled those out first. So sorry about that, I bumped the camera. And I just do the same method that I did earlier, and I just roll and twist and roll and twist and just keep doing that until I get it rolled out to the diameter that I would like. So that one's not wanting to be as round as I like it. Okay, and then I'm just going to dust some of that flour off, and then I have my little pan, and I'm just going to set it on there. And then if I wanted to do like a little crust, then I would just fold some of this over, like so, and then I'll have like a little crust. And then I'm just going to repeat that for the next pizzas. And I have 4 of those little silver pans, and then the rest are going to go on a cookie sheet. And then I just go ahead and put the sauce and the cheese on them, and then put them in the freezer. And I just put them on the tray at first to flash freeze them, and they usually get eaten before they ever make it to a freezer bag. So, but usually if they do make it to a freezer bag, I put a piece of parchment paper inside the freezer bag, and then put the pizza in between the parchment paper so that it doesn't end up sticking. But if you do the flash freeze with the parchment lined cookie sheet, that will help, because then your pizza won't have a chance to freeze to anything. It'll already be frozen before you put it in the bag. So that's the method that I have found that works the best in that way. You could also just freeze the little rounds of dough if you wanted, and then that could be the way you freeze them, and then just pull just the dough out, and then let it rise, and then roll it out. You could do that, or you could have them already flat and just, you know, freeze just the pizza crust as already rolled out crust, and then you could just have people make them as they go. I find it's a bit better to already have them sauced and cheesed. That way we make sure that we have sauce and cheese in-house and ready to go, especially since we make our own sauce. So that's just how it works for us. Now, as far as like toppings, like extra cheese or pepperonis, that's just something that everyone adds as they pull them out of the freezer, because we have some that like that, some that don't. So that just gives, you know, more room for variety for each person. And that takes care of pizza night. Now we are done rolling out all the pizza dough, and so I'm going to clean up this area, and then I will put a tray in front of me and show you how I dress the pizzas and get them ready for the freezer. Alright, so now we're back with our next step, and we are going to, I'm going to make this one have like a little bit of a crust, so I'm just turning it and folding it over, and if you kind of press it up against itself, it should stick. If you're having trouble with it sticking, then you can add just a little bit of water wetness to your fingers, and that should make it stick just fine. So it is nice to have a little bit of a crust so that way it doesn't ooze outside of the pan. If you make, with these they have holes in them, so that can be a little tricky if you have, you know, stuff oozing off of the sides of the pizza. So I try to make sure that our pans have a little bit of a ring even if we don't make a crust, because sometimes we'll put too much stuff on there and then it'll slide off whenever we go to pull it out of the oven. I guess I'm just gonna make one, and it's all the same. What I do to them, I do the same to all of them. So I just put a little bit, like maybe 3 scoops of sauce, and then I just rub the sauce everywhere, all over it. Like so. I'm going to have you keep an eye on that for me while I go get the cheese and the pepperonis and weigh, so I can also weigh in the weigh machine so I can weigh out the cheese. So for the pizzas I make for my husband and I that we are going to eat that night and for lunch the next day, I go ahead and put pepperonis on those because I know we both want pepperonis on those. So I usually do about 1.5 ounces of cheese. Is around about what each pizza gets. And this is where I might get a little persnickety. I do tend to, over the years I've done a lot of calorie counting, so in some instances I'm super aware of that. And it just kind of helps me stay on track, but I haven't been super counting them lately. But having that awareness is still good. But I also want to make sure I have enough cheese for all the pizzas, so I will usually weigh that out, just so that way I can make sure that everybody is getting an equal amount of cheese. So now I'm going to probably put around 7 to 8 pepperonis. And these are the natural choice pepperonis, so these are the ones we like the best. I would like to find some turkey ones that are as natural as this, but lately I haven't found any really good turkey ones that I like the taste of. So we've just went back to the pork ones, which is completely fine. The turkey ones just have a few less calories and a bit more protein, which is nice. So, and then you've got your pizza. And then this will go in a bag with a piece of parchment paper in between the bag and the container. So I would just put the parchment paper inside the bag and zip it up, and then it'll go in the fridge. And my husband will take it to work and pop it in the oven, and he'll have a fresh pizza. So, no big deal. Easy peasy. And then I will do the same thing to the ones that go in the freezer. So they're just on this cookie sheet, just like this. And so I will just top them with sauce, just like I did the other. I'm getting sauce everywhere now. So I just put a couple of teaspoons on there, and I will smear it everywhere. And usually I assembly line this, so I will usually, when I'm not on camera talking about it, I will, you know, do all the sauces on all the pizzas, and then I will do all the cheese on all the pizzas, and then all the pepperonis that are needed on all the pizzas. And I just do it like that all at one time so that it's assembly lined, and I'm just going from one task to the next. And I'm not having to stop in between to, you know, I'm not doing, you know, sauce, cheese, pepperonis, and then sauce, cheese, pepperonis. I'm doing a, you know, all the pizzas get sauce, and then all the pizzas get cheese. So that way I can just kind of focus on one task at a time. So that's how I do that. And then I'm just going to dump the cheese on top of there. And then I will spread it out nice and pretty. And then I will do the same thing to the one next to it, and then all the others. And then these will just go in the freezer just like this. And then if they haven't been eaten in a few days, then I will put them in bags, and then they'll just stay in the freezer until someone eats them. So there we go. That wraps up that part of the pizza making. And I'm going to grab one of my son's pizzas, just came out of the oven, so I'm going to grab that real quick and give you a look at it, if I can get it before he comes in here to devour it. It's just nice, pretty pizza. It's really big. I think it's probably like a 12 to 14 inch maybe. I could be wrong. I don't know. So, but it's a really big pizza. Like, I'm sure if you, I mean, unless you go, like if we went to Papa John's and got this pizza, it would be definitely the 20 bucks or close to that. So, I mean, if we can make a pizza for $5 at home, I say why not? So, it works for us. All right, well, that takes care of it. If you have any questions, or if you try this pizza dough, if you try this method, please comment and let me know. And I would love to hear from you. Thanks. Bye.